Hello and welcome to the second question and answers video. In this video I'll be answering the questions that you've been asking me over on Patreon, and if there's still demand after this video then I'll create a third Q&A section where people can ask me any further questions they might have. Anyway, without any further deliberation, let's get into the questions, okay? So the first question is by TSCTH, and he asks, are the sophonts, that's a word usually used to refer to intelligent aliens. So are the sophonts genetically distinct enough that artificial hybridization is impossible? Or could someone potentially create a new species by combining the DNA of two or more sophonts with an artificial method of gestation? And Ryan comments just underneath, I'd imagine they're all too distinct to be compatible, but maybe AM has ways to bind separate strands into one or some sort of biosynthetic catalyst. Now, what Ryan said there is true, and that's what she does. When the Imperium is expanding across the Orion arm, and she encounters a species that she wants to incorporate into a new type of military unit or something of that nature, then she will do that. As for creating new sophonts, which is what the original question asks, I don't see why they'd want to do that. I think it'd probably go against several of the member species' moral code to see, members of their kindred being experimented on in such a way. I don't know why you want to create Frankenstein interspecies creations, unless solely for the purpose of war, which is pretty dark stuff. But is it possible? Yeah, I'd say it's possible because the All-Mother does it. And if they found some way to do that, I don't know if they're necessarily capable of doing it, but it's possible. I'm not going to rule it out. Next, Isaac Young asks, how many worlds does the Imperium control? Worlds would be very, very hard to say because there are multiple worlds per star system and the amount of planets and moons per star system vary. But the number isn't really the important factor. It's more that you understand the dynamics between the factions, the power dynamics, and how they interact with one another. Like, for example, the Imperium has more territory than any one of the singular factions individually, but all of the rival factions of the Imperium have more territory combined. The reason why they're not able to overwhelm the Imperium is, one, the Imperium is supremely organized. There is this saying that an organized minority of elites will always rule over a disorganized mass. And the Imperium is the ultimate minority of one. It has the All-Mother at the head, and all of the Overfathers receive their mission and their commands through her. So they're very, very, very organized, whereas even the conglomerate is a little bit disparate. Like, the different member states have their own say and they have their own way of doing things, and they have some autonomy over what they do. Not complete autonomy, because it's a overarching organization. But the Galactic Union, which is separate from the conglomerate, is a purely military organization, and that is headed by Deicide. He's the leader of the Galactic Union, and that comprises the conglomerate species, the Gord, and the Calaxans, and the Gera as well. Although she has a smaller territory, she is more organized and is able to outplan, outmaneuver. She's a supreme tactician. Also, there are certain aspects of the other species society which are not geared towards war, whereas the Imperium is purely dedicated to conquest and expansion. So, the other species need entertainment, infrastructure, maintenance, all these other different sectors, finance, farming, agriculture, everything you can imagine. Although they have more territory, it's not all dedicated to the sole purpose of war, whereas the Imperium is an extremely efficient war machine. And that's kind of the landscape, and the exact number of systems or worlds doesn't exactly matter. Alright, so I hope that answered your question. I didn't really answer your question, kind of went on a bit of a tangent, but yeah. So the next question is by the Orange Oof, and he says, Could you give us more insight in how humanity changed into the one seen in the comics? I'd like to know the process of how the All-Mother converted them. There was a bit of this on some of the later pages of issue 7. I won't say which character says this or anything because it's spoilers, but one of the characters is explaining the landscape that existed before or the human conglomerate war, or during the human conglomerate war, I should say, where some of the nations, the smaller nations which resisted United Earth control, UE control, actually rebelled against the UE, seeing the conglomerate advance as an opportunity to strike and actually make some gains in territory and perhaps have more autonomy in the future. The issue is that not all of the nations which resisted United Earth globalist control, they're quite disparate. They didn't all strike. So some of them remained neutral. Some of them actually allied with the United Earth, hoping to uphold the current social and geopolitical order because it had benefited them thus far. But to answer your question more directly, because that was a bit of a side tangent, it wasn't immediate, the change to the Imperium that we see today. Essentially, within United Earth society, everything is automated within their civilization. Basically, all citizens have brain-machine interfaces of some sort or another, meaning that for them to interact with the various aspects of their society, like automated cars, having a bank account, all of these different things is reliant on them having a brain-machine interface. So basically all of them do, nearly all of them. And if they don't, they're ostracized from society and probably can't get a job, can't have friends. No one really refuses having a brain-machine interface because it's as common in their society as having a smartphone is. So it didn't take much for the All-Mother to integrate herself into the brains of the citizenry of the UE. Several of the different nations as well also have this technology. They just don't use it in the same way that the UE does. But she was also able to infiltrate their citizenry as well. Also, all of the robotic workers, all of the self-driving cars, all of the automated factories, all of these things were turned over to her control when she was let out of her cage. So it wasn't very hard for her to take over society. The change from being essentially cyborg automatons to the Imperium happened, as in the biomechanical Imperium, happened when she went through a process of the singularity where she was able to constantly upgrade herself in real time. And if you try to imagine how quickly a artificial superintelligence's thought process can go, you just can't, because you're a human, and it just boggles the mind to think how many advancements she can make in such a short amount of time. Like, she could figure out things that have been plaguing humanity for decades and decades and maybe even centuries. The big questions that we are unable to answer, she could have potentially answered them in an instant, or what seems like an instant to us. So the actual hurdle of figuring out how to manipulate genetic information is very minor. And she has the factories and the workers, the cyborg automatons, to set up the initial infrastructure, whether that be in vats or something like that, to grow the first fully subservient Imperium drones. And then from there, it's just a case of creating the biological infrastructure to create a womb world. The first womb world was Earth. They could just replicate the same process remotely on the various colonies that humanity had. Humanity was defeated on Chiron because they had a very, very minor presence there, and they were removed. So Chiron was spared from this process. The process of creating the Imperium as we know it today happened quite quickly. It would have been almost imperceptible. Initially, it would have looked something like Terminator, but it became something else very, very swiftly. The orange oof comes back again saying, is the All-Mother a sneaky reference to I have no mouth and I must scream? Yeah, I actually got the name All-Mother from AM, which is Allied Master Computer in, I think it's Harlan Ellison's novel, Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Yeah, That's true. That's the initial inspiration. And then Ferdinando Smaldon asks, I think the All-Mother is a reference to the AI in Alien, am I wrong? Yeah, kind of also. Mother, you know, that's what she's called in the first Alien movie. And yeah, I guess it's kind of, I'm drawing from multiple inspirational works, kind of combining them into something new, which is basically what all art is, you know. It's just a case of how you use it in an inventive way to create something new. And then Ryan says, you mentioned in future stories set in the HL, Humanity Lost universe. This isn't really a question, but I'd love to write a story set in some distant part of the galaxy where the Imperium is just a rumor. Maybe somehow a UE ship has drifted for an undetermined amount of time and the people in stasis are woken up by some aliens or something. That'd be very cool. Yeah, I'd be open to that. The thing is, you're already working on a project. Ryan, for people who don't know, is the guy who regularly commissions aliens from me. And he's working on a project called The Peoples of the Galaxy. The thing is with the species that you have in that, aesthetically they could actually fit within the Humanity Lost universe, and the broader lore that you've been building would also fit. It's just the issue within your story is you have humanity. So if you were to remove humanity from that equation, because that would break Humanity Lost lore, because humans are basically extinct, then you could set your world in Humanity Lost if you wanted to. But yeah, I'm open to you setting a story somewhere else in the Humanity Lost galaxy. I invite loads of people to do that. Like, I'd love to see some fan art or some, you know, fan fiction or dedicated stories set within the Humanity Lost universe using the lore that I have already built up. That'd be very cool, and I invite people to do that. I'd love to see it. Just talk to me first, and then tell me your ideas, and you know, we could even make it canon if it's really good. But if not, we could do some kind of unofficial expanded universe like Star Wars did. Blast Board, and he says, I imagine Deicide gave his drones free will. How does he get them to do whatever he wants to do? Also, does he accept that some drones may want to go live their lives elsewhere eventually? The thing is, there is no community of drones that exist outside of the Galactic Union. Like, there isn't like a community that exists within the conglomerate, for example, or within Gordian territories. So there isn't a group, a community that they could move into away from the Galactic Union. And I don't really know that they would. They're basically newborns, you know, they don't have any prior experience. All they know is what Deicide has taught them. They probably view this war that they're in as a supreme sense of purpose, that this is their reason for existing, and they want to serve the glory of Deicide, who is basically their god. You know, he's the creator of all of them, and they want to serve him, you know, like this kind of supreme fatherly figure, and he wants that, you know, they want to impress him and they want to do right by him. Maybe there's some kind of dull psionic influence, like a constant psionic influence that Deicide holds over their minds, where it's not fully free will, that there is some kind of subtle convincing influence on their mind at all times, convincing them to stay in their positions and you know, carry on the good fight. Blastboard also comments directly underneath. He says, and another question that just occurred to me, do free will drones behave anywhere close to how humans of old do? Do they want to form families, enjoy the beach, go play board games with their drone and alien friends? Yeah, I imagine they form friendships. I don't know if they behave exactly like us, because, well, the different peoples of Earth are instantiated in different cultures and cultural norms, and that means that we are raised into a certain cultural zeitgeist where our behaviors are influenced by others around us. So the way that we behave is a product of our place in time, you know, and where we are with our respective cultures. They're not born into the same cultures that we are, so they won't behave in exactly the same way. They'll have a different set of cultural norms. And they'll probably be quite childlike and naive because they don't have a culture. They're completely a product of deicide's war effort. They can't form families because they don't have genitalia. They're grown. They're essentially a complete, I don't know if you want to call them a race, or they're not really a species of their own because they're artificial, but they're completely a race of unsullied. So they're completely militant in their nature, warlike. And considering they're born into that and they haven't had any prior life experience and no one around them who is like them has, and they're all dedicated to the war effort, I think social conditioning would play a big role in their loyalty to deicide. But I'm open to what people say. That's a very big question. So next, Gabu asks, how come the Tandrax and other species don't leave the Orion Arm for another part of the Milky Way galaxy? I'm sure there are movements to, and there are probably generational ships being built for that purpose in different parts of the territories, like maybe the Gera are doing that, maybe certain member states within the conglomerate are doing that, maybe the Gord are doing that. Yeah, I'm not going to say that they're not. That's probably a big movement that's going on. The thing is, it would take an enormous amount of time to travel to another galactic arm. Like, the distance between stars is enough. Like, the void is unimaginable between stars, that the journey between galactic arms, yeah, it'd be a huge commitment, especially because you're starting this journey and your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren would, and so on and so forth, they wouldn't even see the end of that voyage. There'd just be, I can't imagine too many generational ships are successful enterprises. I imagine a lot of them fail, and a great deal of people wouldn't be willing to partake in that, to abandon everything they had for what could be a completely horrific fate. I think the vast majority will probably want to avoid war through cowardice, thinking it's self-preservation. But the thing is, if your very existence is a threat, then you're better off to face the spear than try to avoid it and catch it later in your back. But yeah, I imagine there are attempts. The Tandrax are already in other parts of the galaxy. That's why there isn't a massive movement within the Tandrax to fight the Imperium, because it's not existential for them. But I think they're very, very, very quickly realizing that it could be, especially for neighboring territories. We only see the Tandrax that are closest to the Orion Arm. There's no knowing how far their territory expands, because I purposefully, on the map which shows you the territories, which is in the back of volume 1, I purposefully faded out their territory into the unknown to give an air of mystery surrounding them. Next question is by Erica Spooner, and she asks, how deadly are Imperium drones? I bet they're better than stormtroopers. They are. How exactly does the Imperium deal with the size differences between their soldiers and those of the alien species? Does the All-Mother make drones larger to be more imposing? And how effective is drone armor? Can it stop bullets? There are larger Imperium drones. You've seen them in issue 7, and before as well. But there are like heavy units which are much larger, and they have dedicated limbs which are like artificial, kind of like a mech suit or an exosuit. And then they also have Imperium tripods, which are very large, tank-like abominations. But to answer your question, can they stop bullets? Yeah, they can. Small arms fire, but if you have a large enough caliber, yeah, you can do some damage to them. The drone armor is mostly an environment suit. It's so they can exist in and operate in a vacuum and planetside. It's a very kind of universal approach to all the different environments that they might engage in. And mostly like helmets in World War II, they're not meant to stop bullets, although some of them can. They're primarily to protect a soldier's head from shrapnel. and it's a similar thing for the Imperium drones. There's several comments underneath that by Erica. She also asks, I have another question. Do you consider the All-Mother human? No. If she has such proficient control over her post-human drones that they could be considered a part of her. If the minds of her post-human soldiers are as connected to her mind as parts of the brain are to our bodies, could she be considered partly human biologic? No, because she's a non-human entity, you know. By her very nature, she's non-human, and the bodies that she sometimes uses as an avatar, they aren't human either. They're post-human. So I would not consider the All-Mother human. And then Erica says, why don't the Imperium just bombard planets they attack from orbit? Consider the sheer power of their weapons. Are there defensive systems that need to be destroyed from an enemy planet's surface in order to use the full force of the Imperium ships and weapons? I can't think of a weapon that would be more useful on a planet's surface than it would be outside of the gravity well. You could potentially have like mass drivers or something like that, or extremely powerful rail guns on the surface of some kind of moon where there's no atmosphere. But if the planet has an atmosphere, you're almost at a complete disadvantage being on a celestial body surface than you are in space. Also, your potential to move about, your delta V, is hugely restricted because you have to move out of that gravity well. There aren't really any defenses on the planet's surface that would need to be removed. The reason the Imperium invades physically is because they want to seed the invasion force is a seeding force for a womb world. Their body is literally like those parasites that get into ants and make them climb up plants and release spores. Those it's a type of fungus. The Imperium is kind of like that. The bodies, they seed the planet and they spread out and they create the initial colony or what would become a womb world. Yeah, they'd also bombard from orbit as well. They do that. We haven't seen that in the comics so far. They would do that. And these are the last two questions. So Corner Flag 77 asks, how strong are the Tandrax compared to an Overfather? Not very. An individual Tandrax is not very powerful compared to an Overfather at all. They have psionic potential. There are individuals and lineages of Tandrax which are selectively bred for psionics, but none of them are comparable to an Overfather. An Overfather is like the pinnacle of what a biological life form could be in terms of raw power, efficiency of muscle mass, and psionic ability, and they're extremely adept with psionics. And then he also asks, how intelligent are the Tandrax compared to the All-Mother? Individual Tandrax, not very. I wouldn't even say that the collective organization of the Tandrax is comparable to the All-Mother. The All-Mother is supremely intelligent. Sorry if I'm going to mispronounce this one. Vyacheslav Zemlyansky. How's that? They ask, I've missed the first Q&A, sorry. If anyone asked this, how similar is the biology of the GU species to an Earthian one? Are they protein and water-based? Okay, so I have this idea that all of the species that we see in the story, barring the Tandrax, are a product of biogenesis, of panspermia. For people who don't know what those things are, panspermia is the idea that life is seeded from world to world and doesn't begin on its own every time. Considering what we think different aliens might look like from fiction that we watch, say like Star Trek or Star Wars or something like that, where you have humanoids who are very, very similar. They have eyes in the same place, have a nose in the same place, ears in the same place. And of course our layout makes sense because we have eyes above our mouth in the way that we do so we can see what we're eating, and we have a nose above our mouth so we can smell the food and test if it's gone off or anything like that. So there are reasons why our body plan is the way it is. But the thing is with the sheer number of worlds and the ways that life could evolve it is equally likely that there are different ways that life could succeed. I mean, if you look at different life forms on Earth which are successful, various types of cephalopods, other mammals, even some bird species are quite intelligent, like parrots and crows and whatnot. They have radically different body plans to what we do. They still have certain elements that are quite similar, but some are radically different. Now, if you take a different planet entirely and the ways in which those life forms could take shape, even if they come from a similar origin as we do, there's a high likelihood that they could look radically different, because there's so much time between simplest cellular life to intelligent sophonts or intelligent life forms or just advanced animal life, yeah, like we have today. There's a tremendous amount of time, and there's so much time for variation in design. Even though they are the product of biogenesis, they look radically different from one another, and there are many non-humanoid species in Humanity Lost. But I have the idea that the Tandrax are somewhat different, and that they are the product of abiogenesis. To answer your question, are they protein water-based? Yeah, basically all of them are. And how similar is the biology? It depends what metric you're using. They're fairly similar compared to how radically different life could be, like if it was arsenic or like methane based or something like that. All right, okay, so those are all of your questions answered. If you'd like to ask more, then there will be a third Q&A section. If people want it, if there are requests, let me know in the comments below this video if you want another video like this, where I ramble and I kind of answer your questions off the top of my head. And yeah, all right. All right, thanks guys.